Or does that come up?
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Woohoo, first hurdle.
okay. Hello, everyone. It's such a joy and an honor to introduce someone whose work I truly admire. Someone who's not only creating real change in the world, but doing it with heart, vision, and incredible purpose. Eleanor Carrara is the president of the Plant-Based Cities movement and founder of the Canadian University Initiative, two powerful organizations that are helping public institutions lead the way in climate action, public health, and sustainability. Through her leadership, cities, universities, and government partners across Canada are transforming how we think about food, making healthy, delicious, plant-forward meals more accessible for everyone. What most inspires me about Eleanor is how she combines rigorous scientific knowledge with bold, hands-on, scalable actions. With more than 25 years of senior leadership in global telecommunications, she brings a sharp, strategic mind to everything she does. And now she's using that experience to build a sustainable and compassionate. And this is exactly what Rotary's Protecting the Environment focus is all about, turning knowledge into action and service into long-term impact. And Eleanor doesn't do this work alone. She has a great team, and joining her today is the treasurer for Plant-Based Cities Movement, Brian Labatt, a senior Montreal-based leader in the energy sector and founding member of the Good Judgment Project. Together, and with the rest of her team, they're showing what's possible when we align vision, science, and service. Eleanor will give her full presentation before answering questions, so we ask participants to enter any questions in the chat. At the end, I'll read them out to the group and moderate this portion. So please join me in giving a warm and heartfelt Rotary welcome to Eleanor and Brian. Take it away, Eleanor.
Thank you very much. It's hard to follow that introduction, but thank you very much. I'm honored to be here, and I want to thank the Rotary Club and SRAG for all the important and sustainable work that you do. So without further ado, I will share my screen. There, that over. Okay, I think everybody could see that. Okay, thank you all very much. So I'll be talking about advancing plant-forward food policies across cities, universities, and government. I'm the president of Plant-Based Cities Movement and the Canadian University Initiative. And if you want to contact me, please feel free to do so. This is my email, eleanor@plantbasedcities.org. So I want to thank again the Rotary Club and SRAG for your leadership, your vision, and your commitment. We're similar organizations. Our goals are somewhat different, but they're quite similar. And as Margaret Mead once said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So our environment is at risk, and there's a great importance in terms of moving towards a plant-based food system. First, I'll just talk about the Canada Food Guide. On the left here, we see that fruits and vegetables are about half the plate. In the bottom right quadrant, it's the grains, and in the top right quadrant, it's the proteins. And the food guide says to choose protein foods that come from plants more often. Similarly, here on the right, you see the planetary health diet. And again, dairy and meat are a very small portion of that plate. So I'm sure you've all heard that the Eat Lancet Commission just issued their report on October the 3rd to achieve planetary health diets for nearly 10 billion people by 2050. It's one of the three reports that was issued. And what it says is the transformation to healthy diets by 2050 will require substantial dietary shifts. The global consumption of fruits and vegetables and nuts will have to double, and consumption of foods such as red meat and sugar will have to be reduced by more than 50%. So I just want to mention that the gold standard study that we use in terms of our presentation with respect to food system analysis is the study Reducing Food's Environmental Impacts Through Producers and Consumers, authored by Dr. Joseph Poor and Dr. Thomas Nemesek, and that was in 2018. It's the largest and most credible global study on food's environmental impacts. It has a massive scope. It analyzed 38,000 farms in 119 countries, plus 1,600 processors, packaging types, and retailers. It's a meta-analysis. It screened 1,530 studies and included 570 with strict life cycle assessment standards. It covers the full supply chain end to end, the land use, the farming, the feed, the processing, the transport, and the packaging. It has high variance but consistent ranking in that beef is the highest and plant-based foods the lowest. And it's widely cited. It forms the backbone of climate and food impact models worldwide. The environmental impacts of our current food system. So it accounts for 26% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And of that, 57% comes from meat and dairy, making them the largest contributor. It contributes 32% of global methane emissions. It's a greenhouse gas over 80 times more powerful than carbon dioxide over a 20-year period. 83% of our farmland is used to produce animal products, which deliver only 18% of our calories and 37% of our protein. So what you eat matters much more than where it comes from. Switching to plant-based diets could free up to 75% of agricultural land, reducing the land use from 4 billion hectares to 1 billion. And agriculture drives 60% of biodiversity loss globally, with livestock the dominant cause, mainly through the habitat conversion and deforestation. Now, you don't see many articles about that in the newspaper. The one that does carry frequent articles is the Guardian. These are just a few that I pulled out. That meat is a leading emission source, but few outlets report on it. And that's true. I mean, if you read any newspaper, it's rare that you're going to see this type of story. And why our broken food system remains a climate disaster, broiling the planet to stuff our faces. And then vegan diets massively cuts environmental damage. So we'll talk about land use, greenhouse gas emissions, and water next. Sorry, I'm just moving these up. The potential impact of diet change on land use. So we are currently using 4 billion hectares for our food system. Almost 3 billion of that is pasture land. And then cropland is almost 50-50 between animal feed and human feed. If we all moved over to a fully plant-based diet, we'd only use a quarter of that, 1 billion hectares. So that would be 76% less land for agriculture. And we have to feed the animals. They use up 33% of grains, 77% of global soybeans, and 40% of global cropland. And how many planets would we need if we all ate like New Zealand, for example? We would need 4. The US or Canada, 3. Germany, 2. India, half a planet. So plant-based diets have up to 50% lower carbon footprint than current average diets. So if this is the current diet, vegetarian diet would be a 30% less carbon footprint, a vegan diet, 50%. A plant-based burger has a 90% lower carbon footprint, and a soy drink and many of the other plant-based milk, about 70%. So farmed animals are responsible for 32% of global human-made methane emissions. And methane is 80 times stronger than carbon dioxide over 20 years. If livestock production was a country, it would rank first in terms of methane emissions. So you can see here the ruminants. And global water use. 3% of water on Earth is fresh water, and only 0.5% of that is usable. And 70% of the Earth's available fresh water is used for agriculture. and 20% of that is used for growing feed crops. So this is the chart. This comes from Poor and Nemesek. So I know everybody thinks it's important to buy local because that affects the transport, and it is important to buy local. But you can see here for beef production, these are the greenhouse gas emissions. And here is what they consist of. So land use change would be deforestation, draining wetlands, and pasture expansion, and that would be the green part. The farm part, which is the largest in almost all foods here, includes methane from cows, fertilizer use, and manure. And then you have the animal feed being the orange, then the processing, and then this little sliver is the transport. So if you really want to make a difference, it's changing the diet. That will have the biggest impact on this because as you go down this into other food types, it's very little. In terms of land use, the environmental footprints of dairy and plant-based milk. So this is land use, greenhouse gas emissions, fresh water use, and eutrophication. And eutrophication, hang on, I just can't see the bottom. It happens when too much fertilizer or waste washes into water, causing the algae to grow and oxygen to drop. So this is a study done by the City of Toronto in 2019, and they measured their community-wide based emissions. And I think many people would find it surprising that food was larger than transportation and other services, housing, and goods. And what the City of Toronto proposes is to move the city procurement towards more plant-based foods. We'll talk a little bit about biodiversity. So our global food system is the primary driver of biodiversity loss. This is the UN environmental program. It was a press release in 2021. And global dietary patterns need to move more towards plant-heavy diets, mainly due to the disproportionate impact of animal agriculture on biodiversity, land use, and the environment. This is another report, the Food Foundation, The Nature and Biodiversity Cost of Our Diet, a Recipe for Extinction. And as everyone knows, there's a lot of deforestation going on in the Amazon, primarily for beef and for soy grown to feed farmed animals across the world. 70% of deforested land is converted into pasture. And this is where we're at today as a result of all of this. So we see that 58% of the world's biomass is livestock, 36% is humans, and only 6% are wild mammals. And 86% of species at risk of extinction are currently threatened by agriculture. Just briefly on factory farms, I know we all think, we'd like to imagine a small farm nearby and so on, but 85 to 90% or 99% of animals are raised in factory farms, primarily pigs and chickens. And chickens for egg laying, 80% of them are still in cages where they can't move at all. There's a transition underway, but it's very lengthy, 2036. And factory farming has massively increased methane production. Liquefied manure rots in these waste lagoons and undergoes anaerobic degradation. Pigs, otherwise a negligible source of methane, have thus become significant methane emitters. And the people that live around these factory farms could be subjected to some of the impacts from the spraying of manure from these farms. There's been several cases. This one here is North Carolina. So just quickly, I'm not a scientist, but this is the global warming impact of these three gas emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, starting with carbon dioxide as the baseline. So methane, we spoke a little bit about, is 27 to 30 times stronger than carbon dioxide, but that's over 100 years. But it's a short-lived gas, So it's 81.2 times over 20 years. And nitrous oxide, a very potent gas, is 273 times stronger than carbon dioxide. And what is the approximate share of these gases in terms of the animal agriculture? Methane is about 55 to 60%, and these are the sources. Nitrous oxide, 25 to 30, and carbon dioxide, 10 to 15. Misinformation. There is a fair amount of misinformation in terms of what that food is used for. The consumption of plant-based alternatives made from soybeans is causing deforestation. That is not true. So if we look here, orange is the animal feed, green is direct human consumption, and the gray is the industry. So 6% is used for tofu, soy milk, and others. 13% for soybean oil and 3% for industrial uses. And the rest, 76%, is used for farmed animals. So the great majority of soybeans is used for farmed animals. These are two good sites if you want to look up some of the misinformation claims that are mentioned here. And I know some of the subtle tactics that you see is family farms with cows grazing, but that is not what the reality is in terms of the majority of those farms. So now I'll get into the strategies of what the plant-based cities movement is doing. So we advocate for policy changes to food being served by institutions across Canada toward plant-based, including we address municipalities, universities, the federal government, some hospitals, and others. With respect to municipalities, our strategy generally is to first try to build a coalition. We look for supportive councillors, especially the one in your constituency, because that's what's matter to the councillor. We engage councillors and policy makers with lunch and learn sessions. We partner with nonprofits, climate groups, local citizens, and we review the municipality's climate action plan to see if it includes food emissions, but most of them do not. As evidence-based framing, as I mentioned, we use the Pura-Nemesek study. Positive narratives. We always try to focus on solutions that plant-rich diets provide lower food emissions. They're healthier, sustainable, cost-effective, and we highlight the benefits for climate and biodiversity and health. We storytell and provide local examples. So we start, with some of the successes that we've had, and we try to counter the greenwashing. And we have access to groups that can provide plant-based training. The Canadian University Initiative, that happens, we have steering committees that happen twice a year. I sent out emails twice per semester, one before the steering committee, one after the steering committee, to a variety of groups, including the presidents, sustainability, dining services, and students. We hold those biannual steering committees. I have guest speakers such as chefs, subject matter experts. We align with institutional priorities by framing plant-based food in terms of the university's own goals, such as their climate action, health promotion, equity, and SDGs. And we work with students to try to boost demand. Again, we have access to plant-based training. We counter greenwashing, and we try to speak as at many events as possible. With respect to municipalities, to date, we've had 6 plant-based motions. In Montreal, there was also the Sustainable Food Transition that had lobbied the City of Montreal in 2021. Then we did Brampton, Halton Region, District of North Vancouver, Kingston, and Saanich. These are, I have 2 pages on this, the 6 motions that were passed. And this is the piece of the motion that is actually the action part of it. As you know, there's sort of a preamble in terms of the whereas clauses, and then you have the motion. So I'll focus on 2, because there are many here. Kingston. So that the City of Kingston commit to prioritizing plant-based municipal food procurement as a key strategy to lower environmental impacts in keeping with the 2023 strategic plan by always ensuring that plant-based options are included and prioritized whenever food food is purchased or funded. That plant-rich options be promoted by ensuring they are given a primary position when food is offered, such as the front of a buffet table. And that is extremely important. That makes a lot of difference in terms of the uptake. And that the City of Kingston support and collaborate with community partners on education and awareness campaigns that promote the benefits of a plant-rich diet. That is also very important because you need to support the shift through education. People can't be told what to do. But if you talk to them about the reasons why we're doing this, there is a greater propensity for them to adopt more plant-based foods. And Saanich, I'll just go to the next page. So Saanich was one that we worked on for 2 years. One of our representatives, Karen, in Saanich, worked with the local government there. And thanks to PBCM, they had received free staff training on the benefits of low carbon plant-based food and accessed helpful templates about plant-based food procurement from other communities. And they've had several successes to celebrate, including plant-based food first at key public events last year. And they're now moving from their opt-in pilot phase towards updating our sustainable procurement guidelines and other resources for all staff in the coming year. So we were very, very happy with Saanich. So I'll talk about the Canadian University Initiative now. So we launched that in 2020 in an effort to nudge universities towards more sustainable plant-based food systems. And we have these biannual steering committees, as I mentioned, and regular outreach. And this work was only possible through the incredible support and generosity of the many chefs, academic and professional allies, expert collaborators, Forward Food, the Better Food Foundation, and our campaign manager. In the first couple of years, these were the 10 universities who had presented, and these were other universities that we had worked with. And here, sorry, I'm just going to keep moving this down. Let me just go back up. Okay, so this is the census of all the speakers that we had 2022, then up 23, 24. And I want to talk a little bit about the University of Victoria. A great success with them. They were very interested in the program. So they took the data from 2019 and they measured the purchases by weight and their emissions. So you can see on the left side here, if we look at ruminant meats, and I just want to say that this was an automated graph, so sometimes there's a bit of an overlap between the two sections. So ruminant meats accounted for only 3% of the purchases by weight. Yet in terms of the emissions across the supply chain, it's tenfold, 34%. And for the other meats, it's not quite as dramatic as the ruminant meats, but this was the piece related to the other animal products. And now it represents about half the circle here. And you can see the green here from plant-based foods. Here it's very large. And of course, you've got the sugars and the oils here, but it's still significantly large. And yet, with respect to greenhouse gas emissions, it's very tiny. These are some of the actions that they took at the University of Victoria. They prioritized plant-based proteins, listing those options first on all menus. They replaced beef and pork, poultry, and dairy. They reduced it by 50%. They eliminated all lamb products from their menus because it had one of the highest carbon footprints in the protein sector. Elimination of beef chili. They only serve vegan chili throughout. And the introduction of the 50-50 plant-based and animal-based burger. Other menu actions, the vegan cheese is used as the default cheese, so they must opt in. They have to ask for dairy cheese. And the introduction of vegan mayo as the default spread. And vegan mayo, really, you cannot tell the difference between the plant-based and the animal-based. So that's an easy change for everybody, especially in institutions, because it could make a big difference. And University of British Columbia, They started climate labeling their meals, and the big green one, of course, is the most climate friendly, and the red the worst. We held two steering committees two surveys between 2020 and 2025. In 2020, it was between 2020 and 2022. And the chefs here were those that overlapped in both surveys. So there were nine chefs involved in this survey. So we started in 2020 at 57% animal based. And in 25, we were at 40%. And the projection for 2027 is 35.6. And hopefully, we're still going to continue working on this for the next 2 years. And hopefully, that will be lower. Just wanted to show some examples of some of the universities. Here's the University of Guelph. It was amazing to work with the University of Guelph and their chef. They progressed significantly. They have plant-based options across the board, and some of them are primarily vegan and vegetarian. Another interesting accomplishment at the University of Guelph is the Child Learning Center, which is 100% plant-based. There's also a second learning center in Ontario that's 100% plant-based. And if we look here at the original menu, and you can see the meat and dairy and eggs occupy more than 50% of that. And it emitted over 3,000 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalents. Then when they shifted over to the new menu, the plant-based menu, it was only 1,000 carbon dioxide equivalents. So that is a highly significant reduction in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. Then we had several other types of steering committees. We had brainstorming sessions with the chefs. We had a trade association meeting with the chefs and other groups. We had Default Veg showing how you can take advantage of putting the plant-based meals at the front of the buffet line, or just not putting the meat options there, that they would have to be requested. So now I'll just speak briefly about the federal government. So I had tried to reach the federal government over about a year plus, and they are now going to be presenting at our university steering committee on November the 19th. So there will be representatives from the Treasury Board of Canada. They'll discuss their low carbon food procurement. Nourish is presenting the guide to best practices and green criteria for low carbon food procurement, and they did this as a request from the government. And also Global Affairs, which is carrying out a pilot, a 1-year pilot, and it's called the Planet Positive Food Procurement Partnership. If anybody would like to attend, please, again, just email me, and I'd be glad to send you an invitation. The next steps. So why time is running out? We don't have an eternity to make changes, and we have to scale it. A lot of us need to make them, and that's why we're working with institutions, because it affects a lot of people. But we need much more. So why time is running out? We have potential melts with the Greenland ice sheet, the Antarctic ice sheet, the Arctic permafrost, the Amazon rainforest. Once it dies back to a savanna, the chance of it becoming a rainforest again are very low. We will lose all that biodiversity, which is very sad. Coral reefs, the warming and bleaching actually of the coral reefs, and some have reached mortality in 90% in some of those areas. And the Arctic sea ice is expected to be potentially ice-free by 2050. And the other effect is that the ocean is, because it's dark, it absorbs even more heat instead of reflecting it. So these are just some graphs of where we could be in these years. So in 2050, if we continue the way we are, if you look at the coastlines here, we'd have probably about 20 centimeters underwater. by 2100, that would probably be closer to 200 centimeters. And in 2300, we could be at 1500 centimeters. So our challenges, we need to expand faster. We have to extend further and we have to strengthen our collective impact. And that's, as I mentioned, very, very important. Dietary shifts and rewilding reforestation need to accelerate. Currently, we're 10 volunteers and one staff member. More institutions need to be addressed, both in the private and public sector. And financial support is needed. We are a charitable organization, so we do offer tax deductible receipts to strengthen our national capacity and programs. So I want to thank again the Rotary Club and SRAG for your leadership, your vision, and commitment to a sustainable future. And what is our future? I think it's a question mark. And this is the quote from Barack Obama at COP 21 in 2015. So we are the first generation to feel the effects of climate change and the last generation who can do something about it. So time is very important and spreading this is very important. So that's the end of the presentation. I want to thank the Rotary Club SRAG for inviting me here today. I'd like to thank our audience, our contributors and supporters. And if you are interested in making a difference, again, please contact me. And if you can, please donate and sign up for our newsletters. So thank you very much, everyone. And then I have my references. So I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. You know, just you saying you have 10 volunteers and one staff member and you've done all that, it blows my mind how much you've accomplished and the reach that you have. How many students and how many people have you affected from your university initiative alone?
Well, I would say thousands. I don't know, maybe like 15,000, 20,000, or more than
Yeah.
that. 'Cause, we've gone to the bigger universities. You know, we are focusing primarily on the big ones to start, but of course, we'll continue to address even more.
That's really, really incredible. So a huge round of applause from all of us. And
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you
that's a
again for
lot.
your work.
Yeah, and it's really, really inspiring. So I'm going to take a look at the chat. Does anybody have a question they want to ask out loud? I have some in the chat, but those were from me, so I'd prefer if other people have any to start. Chris?
I have a question about, we have a small community college here but we have a lot of public schools, elementary, middle and high schools. And I'm wondering if you feel that this might be transferable, to younger students.
It is transferable, but it's a little bit different addressing a younger audience in order for them to understand, right? Some of the vocabulary they may not understand. We could do much more, but with 10 volunteers, we are trying to focus on the largest institutions in terms of having the largest impact. But there are some organizations that do go to schools. I mean, I don't necessarily work with any right now. But yeah, definitely schools, especially trying to get children where they're young, where they haven't necessarily fully developed their eating habits. Let's say that change wouldn't be as difficult as some of the older population or students.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Scott?
Yeah, I'll just note along those lines here in the state of Michigan, the governor, with their budget, recently passed a policy that all schools, such as what you're talking about, Chris, would have their breakfast and lunch provided, through the state program. So it would be a policy thing, what food items are provided through that program. So it would have to be, something where you'd have to work with that supply chain, to implement a more plant-based situation. And I think, as Eleanor said, it's educating those policy makers, to affect that change.
Yeah. And in the States, it's a challenge because the meat and dairy industry has a huge lobbying cadre, and kids are required to take milk with their lunch, whether they're lactose intolerant or not. So there are tons of
Yeah,
restrictions that, yeah, we'd have to battle through at the federal level. So thanks.
yeah, that is definitely a challenge, the meat lobby.
Yeah,
And
and
do
the
you see,
Canadian policies are going to be different from the US policies, probably, it seems to me, by a country mile at this point.
Mm. I remember receiving milk at school, and we in our family we didn't drink milk, but yeah, I didn't like it, and we were served it every day, and
And it's a huge waste. I
it
work,
is, it
our
is.
local high school Earth Club started a composting program at lunch, and you can't believe the amount of like unopened milk cartons that just get thrown in the trash.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
There are other cultures that also do not drink milk.
Mhm. Yeah.
is there anybody else right now that has another question they'd like to share? Dawn?
I just had a quick one about climate labeling. I know in the States, and I think most everywhere, that we're all familiar with that little rectangle that has the nutrition and the fat content and all that. Is
Mhm.
there any movement to add a climate score
Oh,
to packaged foods?
that would be great.
That'd be fabulous.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with any. I'm not sure if anyone in our audience would be familiar with that.
Eleanor, I thought I read that there was a university, it might have been in Europe, that was on the menus in the university cafeterias was noting the climate impact of certain food choices and that it changed students' choices dramatically, but I can't remember where that
What
was.
name it was? Yeah, I could look into that and get back to Chris. Yeah,
And is it,
that should be very important because at least the young people are aware of the climate crisis, right? They may choose to eat meat or not eat meat, but they're certainly aware. But I'm not sure how many of them are actually aware of, again, the impact of animal agriculture on that climate crisis because they don't generally hear that anywhere,
right?
right? And so we have to sort of balance that because then it could be an issue saying, well, it's a personal freedom, right? That I want to choose to eat meat. But I'm sure many would at least reduce. And again, it's difficult to ask anybody to go 100% plant-based, but we can all reduce, right? And even the Eat Lancet Commission just came out and stated that 50% reduction. So that's an important source.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Dawn.
I just had one more that you referred. There was a report having to do with hospitals in New York and the the benefits. And I noticed that one of the things they said there was a 59 cent per tray
Reduction.
savings that added
Yes,
to up to $300,000
yes, yes.
savings. And I think that has there been any, we talked, I think this came up the other day about the, the, the challenge of elementary schools and funding for their food programs. And have there been any studies about that quantitative savings by a plant-based diet system-wide, where you say if you implement this, one, you will save because of there'll be less waste, but actual per meal savings.
I mean, there have been certain reports, like you said, the New York City hospitals had realized savings on, they had 11 initially. I'm not sure if they had more after that. And I think part of that success was the Mayor Eric Adams was or is a vegetarian. So, not that I'm aware of, but David, is that something you think that you could potentially answer?
Well, sort of. There have been a few studies in Europe that have made estimates, especially in Britain and Denmark, that I don't have them on hand, I don't remember the numbers. They all say there'd be some very substantial savings. And they also say there'd be huge savings in health too, of course. Health costs would drop dramatically as well because a lot of cardiovascular disease, especially in some cancers, are related strongly to animal products in our diets.
Thank you,
Can you
David.
introduce David for us, Dr. Steele for us, Eleanor, since he's
Yeah,
speaking?
certainly.
Yes.
David? Yeah, well, I'll let David introduce himself, I think.
Okay, I'm stuck multitasking now. I'm fact checking for an NPR show right now. So, but
Oh,
I'm a retired molecular biologist. I was a prof at the University of British Columbia. I was in a couple of institutions before that. Cornell was my first. I actually did my undergrad in the town that I don't remember the first name at the Ann Arbor because I went to U of M, and that and I'm president of Earth Canada and the science advisor to these guys, and I've got to get back to this show. I'm actually fact checking for at the same time. Excuse me.
sorry. Thank you, David.
Don, I don't know if you saw Thomas Hall's put a link to sustainable eating is cheaper and healthier. It's an Oxford study. It's in the chat.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas.
Does he want to speak to that?
I don't know what's true institutionally, but at least on an individual level, that's what some research has suggested, that it is a cheaper way to eat in general, depending on where you source these things. So, tofu block's going to be a lot cheaper than a steak, for example, and it's generally that's a good rule of thumb.
And like you say, a lot healthier as
Yeah.
well. And much, much better for the environment, not just for greenhouse gas emissions, but biodiversity, pollution, water use, ocean destruct, all that stuff that we talk about, really covering all the planetary boundaries that are being affected right now. So, we see one part of it, and then when you really delve in, I'm trained in nutrition, in holistic nutrition. They didn't really even talk about this stuff. It wasn't until I joined SRAG that I realized, oh my goodness, this plant-based eating makes a huge, huge difference. I was already teaching plant-based cooking classes in Banff and just did it for the health reasons. But this just elevates it to a whole nother level, and it makes sense. We're nature, nature's us. What's good for us is good for nature. So, Eleanor, this initiative is just so powerful, and we're also getting our young people who are our leaders coming in up to embrace this way of thinking and change the cultural narrative of that it has to be animal protein to be protein, because we know there's protein in everything. So, and about sustainability of our home, is it worth that burger to kill the planet? I don't think so, because we're going to die anyway. So it's not really in our most common sense interest to do that, even if it's tasty. But yeah, and I also wanted to, does anybody else have a question before I asked more? No? Okay. So I was just curious as to oh, Scott did. Okay, Scott, do you have a question?
No, just a quick comment. I flooded the zone early on with the information from the city of Ann Arbor and its A20 plan and the advocacy of various groups. So I don't know if Eleanor could evaluate the A20 and see if we fit into a plant-based city definition. But it's we're pretty progressive down here. So that's not really a question other than, hey, can you tell us whether we're doing the right thing?
Well, absolutely. And I'm trying to recall, but I think there was another group in the US that had worked in Michigan to go more plant-based. So I'm not sure if you had heard anything about that.
Well, we have Veg Michigan, and they put on a Veg Fest in our neighboring town that's adjoined with Ann Arbor over in Ypsilanti just a couple of weeks ago. It was a pretty remarkable event. They took over a whole parking lot and had a little outdoor theater, and the strongman on Game Changers happened to show up to the event, and he gave gave a presentation. So Veg Michigan is one of the biggest organizations of its kind. And the city of Ann Arbor actually contracts with Veg Michigan to increase plant-based options in restaurants, and they go into churches and give their presentation where they're doing like a solar project, but then they give a presentation to the congregants on the value of plant-based eating and produce a plant-based meal at the same time. So uh, there's there's a lot of things going on. I'm currently building a vegan kitchen in Ann Arbor, uh, and it's going to be a resource to the community. We learned recently that the housing authority is giving points if the housing unit puts on a cooking class for its residents or sponsors one. And so the Washtenaw Optimal Wellness Group, we're talking about how we can use our brand new vegan kitchen as a venue for the city where, it could be they could kick in some dollars to put on these cooking, a couple of other points that are going on down here.
Wow, it's pretty progressive.
Yeah.
That's awesome,
Go for it,
Scott.
Dawn.
And Scott's also doing a whole Diabetes Undone program that Brenda Davis has organized, and he's done a lot of really great work in his community.
Yeah. The thing is, we have some, well, several grassroots organizations, and they're doing sort of the bottom up, let's say, but we don't really have the government kind of doing anything. They did obviously come out with the new food guide, and they do suggest using or eating more plant-based foods in the protein sector. But there isn't any sort of widespread communications, commercials, advertisements, and so on. And that's what we need because we're an insufficient amount of groups to try to spread this message. But anyway, like I said, we're working with the students now across Canada uh, to try to push that demand up. And I don't know, but it's too slow. We need to get a larger scale in terms of adopting more plant-based meals. So that is the challenge.
So, Eleanor, I'll just interject. I wrote a position paper inspired by SRAG, and it talks about putting together all of the, initiatives globally as a coalition to do just what you're talking about, create a global education framework that would have, a global impact. And so, thinking big.
Yeah, and it has to be embraced by the government. I mean, Denmark is a, good example where the Proveg has been working with the Danish government, so it's more publicized than here in Canada. I mean, they made the effort with the new food guide, but it's not really operationalized. It's out there, but if you ask many people, I'm sure most of them wouldn't be able to say specifically how is that food guide divided. So there isn't enough education, as you said, and schools. I mean, it needs to start earlier. We work primarily with universities, but it should start at the grade schools, the high schools, and talk about the importance for them and for the environment
Mhm.
of why they should go more plant-based.
Yeah.
And so, along those lines, Eleanor, because I know we're running out of time here, what kind of partnerships and support do you see Rotary being able to offer to help continue? And sorry, there's a big mower going by me, to offer to help continue and elevate these key issues, and because I mean you're doing this with very little money, obviously, if it's 10 volunteers and one staff member. And what do you see your needs are in your organizations that Rotary can partner with to help you take this even further?
Well, obviously, organizations like Rotary, SRAG, can communicate it to a larger audience, right? And to sort of provide these types of statistics to them as to why we're asking for this. And, I would requote that quote from Obama because there are tipping points, right? So, and I believe that's why he said that we are the last generation that can do something about it. Because beyond that, once the ice starts melting, and I'm not a scientist, I mean, David is our scientist here. Once the ice starts melting, we can't bring it back, you know? So we have to do things now very actively and at a large scale that would and publicize it everywhere. And I can present to other groups if you like, and it's good if we have a scientist there at all times, right? To try to educate as to why this is so important.
And
That
what are your funding needs? Like, what are the things that you would see immediately now that you're challenged with that maybe partnering with a Rotary Club or a district or, a grant situation
yeah.
could help you?
Well, it's hard to get people working, I won't say full time, but several hours a week on trying to address different institutions across Canada, schools, etc. So we need more people to do that education, and most people have to work. So that's the issue. We can't get more people on a volunteer basis that can do this significantly enough to make a difference, because when you're working with universities, it's constant. When you're working with the cities, you got to keep going back and forth. It takes time to do it. So more staff would obviously help. Like the person I have for the university is a staff person. So she is doing this pretty much full time. So that helps. I mean, I used to do that by myself in the past before we had this opportunity to get someone. But it becomes quite a challenge. And cities, I mean, it's basically a one-to-one, I mean, there's a lot of cities, right? Universities, I can address them in an email, address it to the presidents, everybody's there. I tell them what's going on in terms of the environment, environmental destruction. But with cities, it's a lot more decentralized. So more people to address more institutions, and obviously the larger institutions like hotel chains, for example, they can put a default structure to their meals. It's very easy to do. These are simple things that don't necessarily involve any heavy investment of dollars. So yeah, more people focusing on the larger institutions just to get more results.
Eleanor, do you ever work with Greener by Default, the group?
Yeah, you may have seen on one of my last slides in the university piece. Yeah, they were new in 2020. They had attended that first steering committee on December the 9th. And they wanted to talk during that meeting. So, yeah, they gave a short presentation, and there was a lot of interest. And this was all new at the time. So, that January meeting that I had shown at the end there, they had a training session with several of the universities there. So, that sort of, was an enlightenment for everybody. And so, they've been training, yeah, for years now. We've worked closely with them, but it's there's default veg, there's greener by default. So now it's primarily greener by default that holds the monthly meetings, and we work with them.
Great. So for those of you who don't know what that is, they work with larger institutions to help them convert their menus to be more plant forward.
Yes, yes. And sorry, it's the Better Food Foundation that holds the monthly or
Oh,
quarterly.
right, they split, I think.
Yes, yes, there's sort of I'm not sure how they classify, but let's say a division of it, but they're two separate organizations.
I
But they
have
were instrumental in sort of awakening people to the aspect that defaults can actually increase the uptake of plant-based foods.
And I think they say like 50 to 60%. If you just,
Oh, yes.
if you make people opt in to an animal-based meal, they'll just go with the default. It's a plant-based meal.
Exactly. And it worked in hospitals. When they did the New York City hospitals, it worked. It was about 50%, I think,
Yeah.
that stayed with that default option. So it has huge, and you're not changing anything really, it's all sort of psychological, right?
Yeah.
That's what they've given me. Okay, I'll try that. So,
If I could share a funny story, I was at an event where you had to opt in for a plant-based meal. It was a buffet style. And the chef was at the end and she was had her arms kind of around this part of the buffet table. And I said, "What's going on?" She goes, "Everybody wants this plant-based food and we only made enough for the people who pre-ordered it. And I'm guarding it."
I know because plant-based meals have evolved. They're not just peanut butter sandwiches or salads. They've evolved. We've got some pretty impressive chefs. I mean, we have a chef that trains our university chefs across Canada, and it's delicious food.
Yeah.
So people have, I think, this preconceived idea of what plant-based foods are. It's not just salads.
I think it's gross.
That's what we try to push in our task force. I also wanted to ask Brian if you have any words, working with Eleanor and with the initiatives to share with us today as well, being the treasurer and in your experience.
So let me tell you, Eleanor has basically been the inspiration that's taken us from, I would say, zero to where we are today. And it's been her effort and her passion and her sole focus, to be honest, to get us here. And building upon your earlier question and what she said, we're growing, and so if we can, I saw the comment from Thomas about leveraging somebody with money. We're now a charitable organization, so that is a step change for us. So if we can leverage that status together with obtaining donations and/or fiscal support, will allow us to go exponentially further. So that would be, I think, our that will be our goal in 2026. And if we can leverage either people that would say, members within your organization that can say, yeah, I really believe in it. And I'm also busy, but if you would donate, and I think we would be able to make really good use of that money and build on Eleanor's leadership to take us to an even higher level. And that's how I would put all of what I've heard over the last hour together.
That's excellent. Thank you. So maybe what we need to do is connect you with people that are specialists in applying for Rotary,
Absolutely.
grants and support, because they do have very specific requirements for all that. And being a nonprofit, you already meet one of the most important ones. So
That would be fabulous.
yeah. Okay. Well, that's something to put on the agenda. Anybody else have any closing comments before we go? This has been just fabulous.
Thank you. And we just need to scale up faster. Yeah, just do it faster. More, and again, institutions, I think, are a good key. Going to all the elementary schools is very fragmented. We don't have enough people to be able to do that. But if we go to the larger institutions that serve thousands of meals a day, that would be sort of the way to go. And then that needs to be supplemented by education. And
There's a lot of misinformation out there.
exactly. That's what we have to be very careful of.
Yeah. Okay, is that a wrap then? Are we good? We're right at the top of the
Very
hour,
good
like
job.
perfect timing. I just can't thank you enough, Brian, Eleanor, Dr. Steele, and everybody for coming today. And this is just great, been just fabulous, and just such wonderful information and data, and really successful initiatives that are very powerful. It's so impressive. So thank you again.
Well, thank you so much for inviting us and helping us spread the message. I mean, we really admire you, Dawn. I mean, for the years that we've known you and all the good work that you've been doing and the organization has been doing. So thank you all very much. And thank you very, very much for inviting us.
Thanks again.
Yeah.
Have a
Thanks,
great day,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.